comes to gaming on a budget, the market has somehow lost its way a little, with new cards not offering up the generational uplift that's expected by consumers and the hardcore gamers who want the very best they can afford, without going over that all-important budget. Sure, you won't get 4K 60 FPS, but not everyone is into that and just wants something that can handle 1080p and handle it well. So the big question, if you have around $230 to say $270, what should you buy? Well, that's what we're going to find out. But before we do, here's a quick word from this video sponsor. Hello mate, you alright? Yeah, just got all the bits from my banging new gaming PC. Just got to put it together. It's going to be so much better than yours. Oh, right. What did you get then? The latest Intel 12th gen processor, a feature patched motherboard, and 32 gig of DDR4 memory. See? Miles ahead of yours. You realise that board needs DDR5 memory, don't you? Don't tell me you went and bought the wrong stuff. DDR4 is so 2014. I can't believe you was that stupid. What? No, you're joking. What should I get then? For me, I'd be looking at Corsair's newest Vengeance DDR5 kits, or if you're wanting that all-important RGB, then go for the Dominator Platinum RGB. Oh, you are a lifesaver, thanks, but where can I find out more? By clicking the link in the description below, of course. And you call me the stupid one. So the latest GPU release from AMD at the point of filming is the RX 7600, and it was a bit of a flop, especially considering AMD were going to release it for $299 before quickly dropping it to $269 just before it launched. And even then, it was a bit of a letdown, with only 8GB of VRAM on a 128-bit bus and 288GB a second of memory bandwidth, when compared to the likes of the older 6650 XT. Well, it actually stacks up pretty well, with just 2% extra bandwidth in favour of the RDNA 3 based GPU. In terms of the other specs, it's identical. The same amount of shading units, texture mapping units, ROPs, compute units, RT cores, and even the same amount of cache. So where's the argument for buying the newer card? Especially as the 6650 XT comes in 11% cheaper at just $239 and can still be bought brand new right now. Now, if by a miracle the newer RDNA 3 architecture can somehow push forward, then this could be a close one. But with such a price disparity, there may be a really strong argument to avoid the newer RX 7600. But that's why we're here, to find out exactly that. So to test, we took both cards and put them onto our GPU test machine with an Intel Core i9 12900K and 32GB of Patriot Viper Venom 6200MHz dual channel DDR5 memory on an Asus Maximus Z690 Hero motherboard. All of our testing was done on Windows 11, and we tested 15 games in total, with 4 of those games also tested in terms of ray tracing to see if there's any improvements there too. Now, due to the price and nature of these cards, we'll be focusing on both 1080p and 1440p data today, and also looking at the overall average percentage difference between them and how they stack up in terms of value for money. We'll be focusing on 10 games in total, but we will have all of the data for 15 games plus the ray tracing titles as well. So let's get into those glorious benchmarks. Starting things off with a Plague Tale Requiem, and the RX 7600 is off to a somewhat good start. On the Ultra preset at 1080p, it comes in 6% faster than the 6650 XT and 8% faster at 1440p, which all sounds well and good until you remember that the 6650 XT is 11% cheaper, meaning that these gains aren't really all that impressive. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 on the Ultra preset shows slightly better gains, with the 7600 coming in 11% faster at 1080p and a smaller 9% faster at 1440p. While the 1080p performance could be argued as being on the money, gamers of today I think expect larger increases when parting with their hard-earned cash. Moving over to control, and things get much closer. On the high preset at 1080p, the 7600 still leads the way, but now by a much smaller margin of just 2%. While 1440p sees that gap widen to now 7%, but it still doesn't equate to the extra $30 that the newer GPU retails for. As we enable ray tracing, each card at 1080p now sits just a single frame apart, which can be chalked up as margin of error, equating to just 2%. While it's very much the same story at 1440p as well, a single FPS in favour of the 7600 equaling 4%. So again, nothing of big significance. In Cyberpunk on the Ultra preset, the 7600 again comes out the faster of the two, but only by a margin of 7%. While 1440p more than makes up for it though, with the RDNA 3 GPU coming in 15% faster on average, though at 53 FPS, this isn't exactly groundbreaking performance. When we enable ray tracing, both cards take a pretty big hammering with unplayable frame rates across both of them at both resolutions. Though I guess in what you'd call a win, the 7600 does manage to come in 18% faster than the 6650 XT at 1080p, though it's a bit of a hollow victory, while 1440p sees the 7600 come in 33% slower. But when we're talking single digits, it's not really something to write home about. Doom Eternal always throws up some odd results, and it's no different here. Even after many retests, the RX 7600 came in 5% slower at 1080p, but 2% faster at 1440p. At such high frame rates, neither card is anything to grumble at, and even with the differences between them, it would be completely unnoticeable. In Dying Light 2, it's another win for the RX 7600 by a margin of just 5% at 1080p on the high preset, while 1440p increases that lead slightly to 6%, though we're just under the 60fps threshold that most gamers crave, though I guess dialing down some of the settings would see that change slightly. Hogwarts Legacy is one of the games where the 7600 suffered, especially due to its lack of VRAM, though it still manages to command a 6% lead over the older 6650 XT at 1080p on the Ultra preset, while at 1440p that gap narrows, now with the 7600 just 4% faster. Though considering the price disparity between the two cards, the extra cost involved just isn't worth it for that kind of lead. Spider-Man Remastered on the very high preset sees the 7600 coming in with a 10% lead over the RX 6650 XT at 1080p and a 7% lead at 1440p. Maybe the newer games in our suite are actually able to harness the newer architecture better, but it's still hard to ignore that the 6650 XT comes in 11% cheaper than the newer RDNA 3 based GPU. As we enable ray tracing, performance takes a hit as you'd expect, but the 7600 still manages to push out 6% more frames at 1080p and 9% at 1440p. With both cards being 1080p focused, the lower resolution numbers are actually, well, pretty decent, while 1440p does suffer slightly on both of them. Microsoft Flight Sim is one of the most demanding games that we test, and with these cards with subpar memory configurations, that's clear to see, as even at 1080p we were unable to hit 60 FPS, though the 7600 did come in 8% faster at the lower resolution and 15% faster at 1440p. Again, while the gains are good, it's just not enough to warrant the inflated price of the 7600, which, based on the data today, needs to have a price cut to be able to compete. Finally, rounding things off with Watch Dogs Legion on the Ultra preset, and it's the same thing again. The 7600 is the faster of the two cards, but only by a margin of 5% at 1080p and 7% at 1440p, further cementing that it's just not great value for money. Enabling ray tracing saw both cards come in with identical performance at 1080p, though the newer RDNA 3 based GPU did command some stronger 1% lows. While at 1440p, the newer 7600 fell behind by 5%, which sounds like a lot, but when it equates to a single frame per second, it's really not that dramatic, and who's going to be gaming at around 20 FPS anyway? Okay, so as bad as the 7600 is, it does beat the 6650 XT in pretty much every test. Though in some cases, well, it wasn't by much, and that's clear to see when we look at the percentage differences at 1080p, where on average, the RX 7600 only comes in 5% faster than the 6650 XT, with the biggest gain being in Call of Duty and the worst coming from Death Stranding. For the most part, a lot of the games were between 5 and 8%, including the likes of Cyberpunk with and without ray tracing enabled. But as we move up to 1440p, Cyberpunk shows a pretty stark difference, with the 7600 coming in 33% slower. But as mentioned, we're in single digit territory, and it's really not as big of a difference when you're talking 2 frames per second. Now at 1440p, the 7600 comes in 4% faster overall, but if we take out that outlier of Cyberpunk with ray tracing turned on, the 7600 now sits 6% faster than the older 6650 XT. Now this all sounds well and good until we remember the price of each respective card. $239 for the 6650 XT and $269 for the 7600, for just 5% more performance at 1080p and 4 or 6% depending on how you look at it at 1440p. Now for me, that just isn't enough to warrant the extra cost, and that's clear to see when we look at the cost per frame, where at 1080p the 6650 XT comes in 7% cheaper per frame, and is also only separated by just 5 frames per second on average. Well, I guess while this doesn't hold a torch to any of the used 20 series and 10 series cards, which offer far superior value, with the only caveat being that you'd have to buy them used, meaning that the 6650 XT is the best value GPU you can buy brand new right now. Now, as we move up to 1440p, the margin is slightly lower, with the 6650 XT coming in 6% cheaper per frame than the RX 7600. And again, further showing that it is the best value money GPU that you can still buy without looking at the used market. Though it is very hard to ignore the 2080 series, which comes in sub $3 per frame at the higher resolution, especially that 2080 Ti, which just seems to have frames for days. Now, another option is a 3060 Ti on the used market, which would be even better in terms of value for money at both 1080 and 1440p, and would arguably be the best value for money without dipping too far back into cards that are, say, at least 2 generations old. So I guess there's definitely something to think about. But again, used card, no warranty, it's just not going to be for everyone. Either way, I think it's clear to see that the 7600 just isn't up to scratch. And while we knew that in our day one review, this has just further supported the fact that by looking at how it compares to a similar tier of card from the generation before. And for me, it just doesn't add up. Now, if AMD were to cut the price to say $229, then we'd be having a whole different discussion. But that's not the case right now, and I can't see AMD making any drastic changes like that anytime soon. Even though we're all kind of more than aware that consumers aren't exactly buying the 7600 in droves. So maybe they'll actually be forced to make some aggressive repricing. Or maybe, they just don't care. For now, that about does it for this one. I honestly, expected better. But I've also grown to realise that's hardly ever the case with these new GPU launches that we've seen from both AMD and Nvidia. Hey, maybe the new 7700 and 7800 series GPUs that are coming will completely flip the script and surprise us. But again, I'm not really holding my breath. So there we have it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. And if you want to talk about the sorry state of the GPU market, then head over to our Discord of over 3,000 members. The link is down below. Also, if you want to help support us in making more content like this and get special powers on our Discord, along with exclusive behind the scenes content, monthly live streams and much more, then you can do so through Patreon. The link for that is also down below. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.